So, Stan, thank you so much for being here today. It's a pleasure to have you, and the place is yours. Thank you.
Okay, good evening, colleagues. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I'll start sharing my screen with the presentation. I hope you will see it. Yeah, it should be. Yeah, and yeah, Marcia, you told everything totally correctly. And I'm PhD candidate and lecturer, of course, you mentioned. And from the next study year, it will be one more additional course, Sociological Perspectives on Animal Rights. And my previous master's, I have it two. One was in arts and second one in environmental sciences. And now I study sociology. And indeed, my research interest is the place of companion animal like cats and dogs and their homeless, stray brothers and sisters in modern society, in urban setting, their existing moral status, existing legal rights, forms of abuse and violence they face. So today, I almost want to talk about the concept of moral or legal rights from the philosophical or law perspectives, but from the perspective of political sociology. And that's why initially I planned to start my presentation with a short introduction about political sociology and its relation to the topic of social changes, social groups, and companion animals. But as the Halloween is coming, I couldn't resist the urge to open this session with some Halloween funny cat meme. But to make the transition from cats to political sociology and social changes academic, I refer to somehow wonderful book of Anne Xiaomina, Memes to Movements. And why cats became a meme and meme power social protest that brings us to the social changes, asks Xiaomina in the first chapter of her book. For centuries, cats have faced invisibility and stigma, and there is no cat in Chinese zodiac, and Pope Innocent VIII, for example, excommunicated all cats. They were stigmatized during the Salem witch trials, and then in 20th century, comic strips like Garfield painted cats as troublemakers and their owners as neurotic losers. And owning a cat is more of a private act rather than owning a dog. And thanks to the internet, for the first time in history, literally millions of cat lovers realized that they were not alone. And pretty soon, while sharing cat memes, they realized that their collective meows were strong too. That is very crucial for social movements as well. And it's a great illustration on how and why internet media gives voices to so many modern social movements. And much like cats, marginalized voices have historically been silenced until they found their meme moment. And as our topic today is also related to the violence to the companion animals, meme of the day will be a little bit violent like this. And now let's move to the discipline of political sociology because this is the framework of my study I'll explain you today. So political sociology examines the complex dynamics involved in the development, continuation, and transformation of various political systems in society. And it clarifies the mechanisms that influence different political systems. The classical institutional approach of political sociology focuses on the importance of social factors and outcomes related to the distribution of power in societies, as well on political tensions, because these political tensions lead to changes in how power is allocated. And this viewpoint frequently focuses on the state as a certain point or as a central point of study and like core of the political discussions. But on the other hand, why it's related also to relationship to the animals, we have theorists like Gramsci and Foucault who argue that power relations in society are present in every element of social life, also in our relationship with an animal and companion animal as well. And it offers a broader perspective, including in the scope of political sociology, governmental structures like veterinary services, and relationship of different class dominances through society, and extends our scope beyond explicit acts of coercion and reveal that power relations exist within many aspects of society, for example, in our relationship with companion animals. So it can be argued that the discourse in contemporary political sociology frequently combines these contrasting perspectives and emphasizing the interaction, in fact, really intricate interaction between state institutions like veterinary service and civil society like NGOs and grassroots movements. So it's important to analyze power dynamics, interaction between society, state, and political conflict, and on a macro level to focus on national states, but it's not a topic of our presentation today because we focus on smaller scale today, on individual political behavior influenced by social identities and group dynamics. So when we talk about animal status, animal value, or legal rights, it's not only the question of philosophy, law, or environmental sciences. It's also about power relations in society, mutual conflicts, strains, social norms, etc. So today, I will provide you with an example from Latvia. And just to be clear, I will focus only on companion animals like cats and dogs, and stray animals, also cats and dogs, living in urban area. In fact, because of human mistreatment, because they're abandoned animals or victim of human cruelty. So in March 2019, a consortium of 24 non-governmental organizations we have here and animal welfare charities in Latvia, they issued a petition addressed to the Latvian parliament, the president, the ombudsman, and various ministries. And the authors attribute the current dramatic situation in animal welfare, characterized by numerous violent incidents and the unregulated sale of kittens and female cats. And they attribute it to the influence of breeders' lobbies and the inaction of the Food and Veterinary Service, which in case of Latvia is responsible for the animal welfare control. So the petition authors observed that acts of violence against animals remain unpunished, possibly due to the self-interested motives of certain groups, for example, breeders, animal traders, etc. And as an outcome, the activists urged political leaders to implement particular modification to the legislation, such as harsher punishments for animal abusers or more regulation for breeders and puppy mills. And then a demonstration was organized in front of parliament to support the petition. And the NGO, known as Animal Police, they're not police, but they're NGO, they coordinated the event. They invited all individuals who emphasize with abandoned, homeless, and shelter animals to participate and also to add their voice to this protest. And indeed, the situation with animal welfare law is really tricky in Latvia. Before 90s, when Latvia was a part of the Soviet Union, there was no responsibility for animal welfare violations. In fact, the administrative liability was included in the USSR Administrative Violation Code only in 1988, at the dawn of Soviet era, with an argumentation that Soviet people can't be violent to an animal. But the penalty was really ridiculous. It was mutual warning or 50 rubles fee. And certainly there was no separation between companion animal or farm animal. In fact, nobody thought about companion animal that time. And in the early period of independence, Latvia adopted this administrative violation code, including this version of the article for animal welfare violations, and also adopted the Soviet criminal code that was issued in 1961. And just in the 1993, there was added like criminalization of animal torture. And the veterinary medicine law that came in force in 1992 also focused on farm animals and prevention of zoonotic diseases. So also there was nothing told about any kind of animal rights. The legal situation started to change in the beginning of 2000s because Latvia needed to fulfill membership requirements to be added to European Union. And in 2000, the existing animal welfare law came in force, and 1 year later, new version of veterinary medicine law. And this is the first time when the beginnings of companion animal rights can be traced in Latvia, but only of the companion animal that can be called a pet, a property. The rights of abandoned cats or dogs were out of scope. So stray animals, also known as homeless, free roaming, or feral, form a significant element of urban social dynamics. They have a vital influence on urban health. They exemplify the socio-economic difficulties and reveal concerns regarding human-animal interactions. And animals previously owned and now homeless due to their owners' financial strain, they generate multiple problems with urban welfare alongside the welfare of the animals themselves. So they're falling into the scope of social studies. For example, Beck in 1973 argues that examining urban animals from the perspective of their status helps clarify human behavior and enhance comprehension of the human urban experience. And the situation in Latvia started to change in the 2020s. In 2024, the Latvian Veterinary Association explicitly asked local governments to promptly address the issue of stray animal overpopulation, since attacks on people and other animals by abandoned dogs represent a considerable risk. And previously, Latvian veterinarians mentioned diseases transmitted in Latvia by cats, and also the inhabitants write or speak frequently about the troubles caused by cats, such as damage to car paintwork from worming on hoods or urinating to marked territory. It also should be noted. And prior research also indicates that stray dogs present safety risks to human lives and health, but domestic cats to native wildlife. So, few years I represented Riga municipality and participated in sessions of the Parliamentary Commission where legislative ideas proposed by NGOs were evaluated. And the discussions were characterized by really intense disputes between activists and representatives of the Veterinarian Association, and together with officials from the Food and Veterinary Service. And the perspectives of veterinarians and veterinary inspectors contrasted with those of campaigners about the essential legal amendments. The fervent debates among activists prompted concerns about whether the events during the parliamentary session stemmed from a persistent underlying dispute. So in Latvia, animal-related NGOs mostly focus on grassroots efforts, such as street work and shelter operation, rather than participating in protests. So that made me suggest that the roots of volunteers' contradictions with veterinarians and inspectors are laying not only in the realm of everyday interactions, but also in their beliefs about moral value of companion animal. In Latvia, activists refer to themselves as volunteers, so I shall use this term forward. And the parliamentary debate just mirrored the daily tensions, underscoring a structural problem where regulatory agencies and grassroots participants differ in their methodologies regarding the welfare of animals, because the legislative changes are just a delayed reflection of social changes. So where is the obstacle between volunteers and veterinary professionals in Latvia that slows down the process of animal rights evolution? And my assumption is in different perceptions of companion and stray animals' moral value. So how can an animal be used in social studies? The use of animals as an explanatory instrument offers a refined comprehension of the distinctions between veterinary professionals and volunteers, and the correlation between human perception of animals' moral value and their associated rights is frequently contested, especially in urban environments where stray animals provide a significant concern, and dilemma between trap euthanize and trap neuter return program exists. And trap neuter return programs integrate roaming animals into the urban ecosystem and also reflect the social dynamics of human relationships, because humans choose to euthanize animals or to allow them to continue existing in this area, in this city. This is the venue where municipal officials and professionals, such as veterinarians and veterinary inspectors, clash with proponents of harmonious urban lifestyle. And veterinarians, inspectors, and animal welfare volunteers frequently engage with animals, and their beliefs regarding the moral value of animals and their comprehension of animals' rights may affect their perspectives on the topic of stray animals as well. And understanding the moral and legal viewpoints of these stakeholders may clarify the root causes of these contradictions and guide more unified policy decisions. So my study investigates the possible causes of the aforementioned contradictions by analyzing informants' beliefs regarding the moral status, regarding value, regarding legal rights of synanthropes, animals cohabiting with humans, and furthermore, the engagement between volunteers and veterinary professionals, especially regarding the implementation of animal welfare legislation, is another vital domain lacking empirical research in Latvia. This knowledge could promote a transformation in societal perception of animals, contributing to the redefinition of ethical standards and expectations regarding animal treatment, animal welfare, and also fostering the development of more nuanced and effective animal welfare laws and policies that takes into account the realities faced by organizations, NGOs who are directly involved in promoting animal welfare and rights. So in case of Latvia, we have three types of stakeholders: grassroots volunteers, rescuing stray animals and also fighting for legislative changes. They also regularly write complaints to the veterinary service about different cases of animal abuse they see, for example, illegal puppy mills. There are also veterinary doctors who daily see animal abuse and also sometimes inform veterinary service about this violence. They also have the legislative voice through the veterinary association participating in this parliamentary group. And at last but not least, there are veterinary inspectors who are responsible for the Control of Animal Welfare Act, who react to volunteers and vets' complaints and have a primary role in legislative initiatives, as there's a structure of the Ministry of Agriculture, the ministry responsible for this law. So what kind of abuse do they face? And we're not talking now about the exceptional forms of violence like torture, murder that are penalized in criminal code and mostly done by people with mental disabilities, heavy intoxicated people, or as the act of violent revenge to their partners in marriage. No, just routine, daily, widespread forms of abuse and non-compliance with animal welfare regulations. So the volunteers rescue initiatives mostly focus on stray animals. First of all, they implement trap neuter return program for feral cats, releasing so-called wild cats and sheltering socialized cats to find them new owners. They face opposition from local residents who disturb animal catching because of their personal views. And it's really interesting. What are these views? First of all, the view that there will be no cats on the streets if they all will be neutered. But kittens are so cute, we want more kittens on the street. Or each female cat need to fulfill herself as mother, but the neutered male cat does not feel like a man. Or because in the Bible it's written, be fruitful and multiply, so don't neuter street cats. Because of these obstacles, there are a lot of stray cats on the streets, and as a consequence, hoarding cat ladies, having dozens of companion animals in their flats, and of course, these cats live in pure conditions, and acts of cannibalism between them in these flats is a routine. And also volunteers face different types of animal abuse like chain dogs who are being held in dysfunctional conditions, or kitten and puppy drawing. This illustration on the slide is this kittens in a bag is taken from a series of Tom and Jerry, where Tom after death goes to heaven, and also this kitten in the bag after drawing also gets there. But as a result of legal breeders' actions, there are a lot of abandoned animals on the streets. And indeed, we have detected an increased amount of strays after the pandemic lockdown was over. And volunteers also inform veterinary inspectors about these puppy mills as they serve through advertisement portals where these animals are sold. And the veterinary inspectors, they control welfare conditions in flats of above-mentioned hoarders. They control physical abuse, mostly of companion animals, and also welfare mistreatment, like transport of animals without an animal transporter's authorization, or violation of the rules of keeping animals, and which has caused physical harm to another animal, for example. And also, they're responsible to control breeding, including illegal breeders. And the third group, veterinarians, they daily face and provide medical care to companion animals who have faced abuse or mistreatment. And also vets need to deal with situations of ethical dilemmas, like when the owner wants to euthanize his healthy animal, because animal is a property, or refuse to euthanize his pet who suffers pain because of illness. I know that the word pet has its negative connotation in animal rights philosophical discourse, but sadly I need to use it now when we speak about an animal's property status or views of a certain social group who perceive a companion non-human animal as a pet. So once again, question is there a different perception of companion and stray animals' moral value between volunteers and veterinary professionals? And how this moral value influence social development, social changes? So this research was conducted in 2022-24, utilizing a qualitative methodology, semi-structured interviews, sorting in total, and we use a concept of saturation and then three-circle coding and in vivo 14. So let's first of all examine the attitude and beliefs of grassroots homeless animal volunteers regarding veterinary professionals. As we have two types of veterinary professionals in Latvia involved in animal protection, I will start with veterinary inspectors. The negative attitude and moral outrage toward inspectors are closely linked to the beliefs of volunteers, and interactions with veterinary inspectors, such as inspections at volunteers' residence housing rescued animals, or responses to volunteers' complaints regarding puppy mills, they're characterized by negative feelings indicated by all respondents. No affirmative sentiments regarding veterinary inspectors have been identified, and the informants believe that inspectors lack empathy and do not share the affection for animals exhibited by volunteers. They assert that inspectors neglect complaints due to the laziness and reluctance to leave their comfortable offices, and their inaction stems from professional animosity toward volunteers. The adverse disposition toward inspectors arises from instances where inspectors penalize volunteers for non-compliance with regulations during inspections of rescued animals. There are specific limitations on the number of animals permitted in apartments, and the required vaccines that must be administered as well. And occasionally, volunteers neglect to adhere to these regulations due to their desire to rescue as many animals as possible. And a negative attitude arises in circumstances when inspectors, rather than conflicting illicit breeders, opt to penalize volunteers who are nearing fatigue while attempting to address issues that the inspector should be resolving. So then the relationship with veterinarians appear to be more complex than that with veterinary inspectors. The attitudes and ideas of volunteers are shaped by the treatment of homeless animals in veterinary clinics, and respondents attributed the negative opinion toward veterinarians to their insufficient involvement in therapy or excessive treatment expenses as a contributing factor. According to informants, veterinarians' reluctance to actively participate in the treatment of homeless animals is attributed to their personal traits, and some informants assert that veterinarians hold a negative perception of volunteers, viewing volunteers as superfluous and malevolent, or due to their belief that volunteers attempt to save all strays interfere with the process of natural selection. And one possible explanation for these tainted relationships is the concept of challenging trade proposed by Rothmeyer Cooper et al. You can see the DOI on the screen if you want to read this paper. So Rothmeyer Cooper proposes that this challenging trade occurs when volunteers who bring stray animals prioritize treatment above veterinarians and put an undue strain on clinic resources due to their frequent visits. And fully, the concept of triadic relationship is described in this paper, but shortly, challenging triad includes owners with a close relationship with their companion animal, and the positive relation with the veterinarian, but the vet and the animal typically do not have any close relationship. Also, there are narratives that reveal a positive attitude toward veterinarians and enthusiastic veterinarians' participation in the care of strays, and their readiness to offer discounts and medical treatments were cited by the volunteers as the reason for this good attitude. And the result shows that volunteers' attitude is neither positively nor negatively prejudged. Rather, the experiences with various clinics affect them in diverse way. Because some informants express the idea that veterinarians are forthcoming because they perceive volunteers as allies in battle against animal maltreatment, and others noted that the open-mindedness of young doctors who share identical views and the moral value of animals brings them close together. And these beliefs align with the harmonious trait idea, which is founded on shared values between owner, specialist, shared beliefs and values toward an animal, and as well on mutual objectives of medical treatment. So we can conclude here that the relationships between volunteers and veterinarians is complex, influenced by a range of experiences that are both positive and negative due to individuals' contacts in veterinary clinics. And this interplay reflects wider disputes, evident, for example, in parliamentary debates, where divergent views on animal welfare underscore fundamental problems. It's plausible that the volunteers' perception of the older generation of veterinarians who do not share similar emotions or perspectives on the ethical significance of animal may contribute to the conflict evident, for example, in these parliamentary sessions where senior delegates represent the veterinary community. And volunteers' attitude regarding veterinarians are not as clear-cut as their attitudes toward veterinarian inspectors. And this may result from volunteers being more inclined to establish personal connection with veterinarians within challenging and harmonious traits involved in this animal patient. So let's move further. And how do the veterinary professionals perceive volunteers? In Latvia, veterinary inspectors require the same veterinary education as veterinary doctors. Almost all inspectors have prior experience in clinics before moving to the veterinary service for diverse reasons. And they may also return to work in clinics if they can demonstrate that their experience and skills are current with contemporary medical practices. And the informants mostly speak about their positive attitude regarding the volunteers' motivation and share stories about volunteers who have brought stray animals to the clinics. And veterinarians acknowledge that financial considerations significantly impact both the field of veterinary medicine as a whole and the capacity to offer aid to homeless animals specifically. And simultaneously, they dismiss criticism from volunteers on their refusal to provide medical care to strays without any compensation. This subject will emerge as a major topic in discussions on discrepancies with activists, because this concept can also be represented through detailed and engaging stories explaining the vet's belief that it's rude to claim that veterinarians pursue their job solely from financial gains, even from a strictly economic perspective, because they describe, we as individual dedicate 6 years to studying and continue to invest significant efforts in our profession through our whole life. And because of emotional stress, our suicide rates are really high. And now the volunteers say that we are doing it for money. No. And this concept is expanded upon under the perspective of viewing volunteering as a sort of business, because veterinarians argue that volunteers use aged or chronically ill animals to get donations from sympathetic individuals, because according to vets, it's not worthwhile to make extensive efforts to prolong the life of a disabled animal, especially if it's unlikely to be adopted. Instead, according to them, it would be better to allocate the received donations towards sterilizing and treating young animals than can be easily socialized. And now the inspectors. The inspectors show a firm, favorable attitude towards the volunteers, recognizing their altruistic intent and significant contribution to the rescue of homeless animals. But they express similar worries as veterinarians. Our funding, our donation to volunteer organizations. However, what demoralizes them the most is the volunteers' cruel rhetoric on social media. The negative comments and verbal humiliation inflict emotional harm on inspectors who experience burnout due to moral dilemmas in their everyday responsibilities. So they recognize the significance of emotions in volunteering, but nonetheless, they argue that empathy toward animals does not justify the humiliation they experience. So, why do these above mentioned contradictions exist? My suggestion is that they are rooted in a different perception of a companion or stray animal's moral value because of different beliefs on moral status and legal rights. What are the homeless animal help volunteers and veterinary professionals' beliefs about the moral status and legal rights of companion animals and roaming animals as well? The responses from informants indicate that volunteers' primary view companion animals as family members, as friends or children, underscoring a belief that attributes considerable intrinsic value and moral status to these animals. And veterinary professionals frequently adopt a utilitarian perspective. And this perspective highlights the difference between humans and animals, and they view companion animals primarily as entities with designated roles rather than a family member. Volunteers advocate for equal legal rights for both companion and roaming animal, motivated by a shared belief in the moral obligation to protect all animals, irrespective of ownership status. Veterinary professionals demonstrate a dual perspective. While some recognize specific legal rights for both categories, companion and strays, the majority believes that strays possesses limited rights in practice due to systemic obstacles encountered in veterinary care. And the beliefs of volunteers are frequently shaped by emotional ties to animals, resulting in a moral advocacy for their rights. And in contrast, veterinary professionals ground their beliefs in the five freedoms framework and practical considerations of animal welfare, which may conflict with the emotional motivation of volunteers. Do the beliefs of veterinary practitioners and volunteers concerning the moral and legal status of animals influence their perception of companion roaming animals? The volunteers' belief in the intrinsic value of companion animals leads them to regard these animals as deserving of respect and rights akin to human rights. This emotional bond fosters a protective attitude towards both companion and homeless animals, and in contrast, the utilitarian perspective of veterinary professionals shapes their understanding of animals predominantly through the lens of roles and responsibilities. Due to it, they frequently prioritize practical welfare needs above emotional factors, and these conflicting perspectives on legal rights result in varied interpretations of ethical treatment, of care for animals. Because volunteers promote enhanced legal protection from a moral perspective, whereas veterinary professionals underscore the significance of the five freedoms framework. And due to this belief, veterinary professionals mostly focus on fulfilling animals' fundamental needs rather than rights. And these contradictions sometimes lead to tensions between volunteers and veterinary professionals regarding animal welfare. And volunteers may see veterinary decisions as excessively pragmatic or emotionally uninvolved. And in return, veterinarians consider volunteer viewpoint as insufficiently informed about the practicalities of animal care. So the study into stakeholders' beliefs uncovers notable distinction between volunteers and veterinary professionals in Latvia, which carry substantial ramification for the implementation of animal management and welfare policies. And diversities in beliefs significantly influence the management of stray animal population, potentially resulting in conflict or ineffective policy outcomes, if not properly candid, of course, as well as affecting the legislative reforms that aim to improve the welfare of domestic and stray animals. And this disparity presents obstacles in developing cohesive and successful policies that fulfill both ethical and practical objectives. And the volunteers perceive their involvement in social change through animals rescue, recognizing intrinsic value of an animal, and in advocating for their enhancement of current regulation, which they consider insufficient. And veterinarians perceive their responsibility as educating pet owners and teaching children on the five freedoms concept. And inspectors see themselves responsible for the rigorous implementation of Animal Welfare Act. And the differences in the perception of volunteers and veterinary experts on the moral value of companion and stray animals illustrate power dynamics as articulated by Gramsci and Foucault, and volunteers, frequently regarded as grassroots activists, confront established organizations, for example, veterinary communities, breeders, regulatory authorities that may maintain conventional perspectives of animals predominantly as property or economical assets. And this dilemma reflects Gramsci's concept of counter-hegemony, wherein transforming the cultural discourse toward animal can result in changes to social norms and actions. And also Foucault's concept of biopower can be utilized to illustrate how the regulation of animal population shown by trap euthanize and trap neuter return initiatives signifies a wider control over life and social standards. Conflict theory, on the other hand, argues that progress in society is driven by tensions and conflicts among groups with divergent interests and power dynamics. And the study underscores persistent tensions among volunteers, veterinary practitioners, and regulatory bodies, illustrating broader societal issues about resources, ethical dilemmas, and legal rights. And these tensions elucidate the sluggish tempo of legislative reform and the occasionally antagonistic dynamic among stakeholders. And this conflict exemplifies broader social problems as marginalized voices for animal rights challenge existing power structures, including regulatory bodies and the commercial interests of breeders, for example. And the engagement of NGOs and advocacy groups like the Animal Police in Latvia, it demonstrates how social movements may utilize general dissatisfaction to create change. And these organizations frequently serve as intermediaries among the public, the government, and various stakeholders. They use mechanisms such as petitions and protests to highlight issues and advocate for legislative reform. And this illustrates the overarching social political notion about social movements wherein collective action like volunteering and providing foster homes for homeless animals is essential to contest prevailing power structures and to promote oppressed groups, including animals as well. And the interaction with animals and the varying perspectives on their moral and legal status can be regarded as an aspect of identity politics, wherein groups particularly shape their identity based on their value of animal. And in case of volunteers, they may perceive themselves as guardians of the vulnerable, which integrates into their social identity, and for veterinarians or veterinarian inspectors like advocates of patient, for example. And according to symbolic interactionism, the interpretations of volunteers, veterinarians, and ordinary people, ordinary society on the value of animals influence their treatment and the rights granted to them. And the research indicates that volunteers perceive significant intrinsic value of animals and hence support robust protective measures. But professionals may embrace a more utilitarian perspective that emphasizes practical care and resource allocation. And this difference emphasizes the significance of the various interpretations of social symbols. For example, strays versus companion animal, and the influence of these symbols on distinct policy preferences. So today I began my talk with an example of a social movement, an Xiaoming and Hermine cat. And so to conclude, I shall refer to veterinary medicine, the book of Barry Kipperman. You see it on the slide. This is a book for veterinarians, decision making in veterinary practice. And Kipperman makes suggestions to clinicians how to manage animal pain. I assume these suggestions are also suitable for implementing social changes in the sphere of animal rights. So treat early, suggests Kipperman. I would say we're a little bit late with changes, but still there is a time to act. Treat often. Therefore, as a society, we must continue to take action. Veterinarians educating, volunteers saving lives, and we scholars understanding. Use a multimodal approach. So bring together as many different social groups as possible to enhance these changes, to promote social development. And last but not least, be empathic, because what would be painful for us is likely painful for them. We can raise the same question regarding rights, can't we? And isn't it the capacity for empathy that determines how we evaluate the moral value of our companion animal, who also frequently become a stray animal? It's a rhetorical question, so let's be empathic, and thank you for your attention.